In 2008, I wasn't really into gaming the way I am now. I had a laptop, and sometimes I would open up Counter-Strike. I didn't really know what I was doing. I'd just join random servers, run around, maybe get a kill or two. That was my idea of multiplayer gaming at the time. One day, my childhood best friend brought over a game, Call of Duty World at War. He told me I had to see it. He showed me the multiplayer first, and it felt completely different from anything I'd seen. The guns didn't just sound loud, they looked heavy, worn, like real weapons from the 1940s. They felt like they had weight behind them. The pacing was fast but not chaotic. You could die instantly, but you always knew why. The way the maps were built, places like Makeen and Asylum, they were grim and muddy, filled with tight hallways or open fields where you were constantly exposed. A lot of them were inspired by parts of the campaign, but they didn't feel like copy-paste levels. They were rebuilt in a way that fit multiplayer. Then he showed me zombies. We booted into a map called Nacht der Untoten, which means Night of the Undead in German. I didn't know what I was walking into. You start in a bombed out building with broken walls, flickering lights, and fog outside the windows. Suddenly, these Nazi soldiers start crawling through the boards. Their eyes are glowing. You don't have music playing, there's just this low hum, the sound of your own footsteps, the creak of the wooden floors. It felt claustrophobic, like you were trapped. I didn't know what the end goal was. I just knew we had to survive. We were buying doors, opening rooms, grabbing guns off the wall. We got overwhelmed pretty quickly, but I couldn't stop thinking about it afterward. That night was the start of something. That game, that disc my friend brought to my house, was the moment I got pulled into gaming, and more specifically, into Call of Duty. And the studio that made it, Treyarch, became a name I paid attention to from then on. When World at War launched in 2008, the Call of Duty franchise was in a strange spot. Just a year earlier, Modern Warfare had completely changed the direction of the series. It was modern, fast, and it blew up on every platform. People didn't really want to go back to World War II. There was already fatigue with the setting. The community had played so many Normandy landings, stormed so many bunkers, and seen the same historical events repeated in every World War II shooter. So when Treyarch revealed World at War, a lot of people weren't excited. But the game did something that no World War II game had done up to that point. It showed war as something horrifying. The campaign opens with you being tortured by Japanese soldiers. The Pacific theater hadn't been explored much in FPS games, and Treyarch made sure to portray it as brutal and unpredictable. Enemies would ambush you from underground bunkers. You'd be walking through thick jungle and suddenly someone would jump out of a tree with a bayonet. You had a flamethrower, not as some kind of overpowered toy, but as a way to burn enemies out of hiding spots. It was one of the first games where I saw people scream as they burned, and even though it was just a game, it left a mark. On the Eastern Front side of the campaign, things were just as grim. You played as a Russian soldier, working your way through a destroyed Stalingrad, eventually marching on Berlin. The violence wasn't glorified, it was angry, it was personal, and it wasn't just about presentation. The gameplay backed it up. Enemies would try to fake death and grab pistols off the ground. AI teammates would scream and cry when injured. The screen would go blurry from artillery shockwaves. The whole thing felt closer to a survival experience than a typical shooter campaign. The tone of World at War set it apart from everything else in the market. And then you had zombies. Most people didn't know it was in the game at launch. You had to beat the campaign first, and then it just appeared in the menu. Nacht der Untoten was simple. 3 rooms, a couple of doors, a few weapons, but it created a feeling that no other FPS had at the time. You weren't fighting an army. You weren't running missions. You were surviving in a dark building with no music, no direction, and an increasing sense of panic the longer you lasted. The zombies were slow at first, easy to handle, But as the rounds went up, they became more aggressive. The lighting didn't change, but it felt like it did. The map got darker even though it didn't. You started to feel like you weren't going to last much longer. For a mode that wasn't advertised, wasn't marketed, and was barely given resources, it changed the direction of Treyarch forever. That was the first time the studio took a big creative risk. And they didn't just pull it off, they built a fan base around it. From that point forward, people looked at Treyarch completely differently. After World at War, people started taking Treyarch seriously, but they still had something to prove. Modern Warfare 2 had come out in 2009 and was a massive hit. The campaign was loud and cinematic, and the multiplayer was fast-paced and full of chaos. Infinity Ward had become the standard, so when Treyarch announced Call of Duty Black Ops, people were curious to see how they'd respond, especially because this time, they weren't going back to World War II. Black Ops took place during the Cold War. The campaign followed Alex Mason, a soldier being interrogated and reliving his memories to figure out what happened to him.
Where's Reznov?
You will answer our questions. Do you understand?
Who the hell are you?
That's not important. What's important is who you are. What's your name?
Right away, the game felt different. It wasn't about winning the war. It was about unraveling something hidden. The way the story was told felt more psychological. You were jumping between missions and time periods. One moment you were in Vietnam, flying through a storm in a helicopter. The next you were infiltrating a Soviet base in the Arctic. The dialogue leaned into paranoia and conspiracy. The theme of brainwashing was a big part of it. You weren't always sure if what you were seeing was real. From a gameplay perspective, the campaign wasn't doing anything radically new, but the pacing and presentation gave it a different tone. It also introduced a few small things that became defining features, like being able to dolphin dive, or how the health feedback looked when you got hit. But where Black Ops really shined was multiplayer. The maps had a much grittier feel. Places like Havana, Firing Range, and Summit were compact and detailed, with strong lines of sight and choke points. Weapons had a weight to them, not just visually, but in how they sounded and kicked when you fired them. You could tell the dev team put work into making each gun feel distinct. One of the biggest additions was the emblem editor. It was something small, but it let players customize how they presented themselves online in a way no other COD had before. Black Ops wasn't trying to outdo Infinity Ward at their own game. It was carving out its own space, and it worked. If Black Ops 1 gave Treyarch their identity, then Black Ops 2 was the moment they doubled down on it. The campaign took place across two timelines, the 1980s and the year 2025. That alone was a big shift, but it wasn't just for visuals. This was the first Call of Duty game that let you make decisions. Depending on what you did in certain missions, the story would branch in different directions. Characters could die, missions could be skipped, and the ending could change entirely. These weren't just background differences either. If you failed to stop a certain character, they'd show up later in the game with new motivations. If you saved someone earlier, they might help you in the final act. For a series known for linear storytelling, this was a huge step. Mechanically, for multiplayer, the game introduced what's now known as the Pick 10 system. You were given 10 slots to build your class, and how you used them was up to you. You could skip a secondary weapon to carry an extra grenade, or drop perks and stack attachments. It gave players more control over their loadouts than ever before. The score streak system also changed the flow of gameplay. Instead of rewarding kills alone, players who played the objective or supported their team could earn powerful tools like UAVs or lightning strikes. The maps were well balanced and visually varied, from tight urban combat in Plaza to open areas like Turbine, where sniping became viable. Even things like the HUD and the sound design felt tuned for clarity. Guns felt punchy but not over-designed. You could hear footsteps clearly. The UI didn't overwhelm you with effects, and on top of all that, there was zombies, which by this point had become a franchise of its own. Black Ops 2 introduced the transit map, which let players travel between multiple zones using a bus. It wasn't perfect, The fog mechanic annoyed a lot of people, but it showed how far Treyarch was willing to push the scope of zombies. Later DLC maps like Mob of the Dead and Origins added even more complexity. With multiple layers of story, buildables, and character arcs, it was clear that Treyarch's dev team had a real vision for what this mode could become. Black Ops 2 felt like Treyarch's most complete game. Every mode, campaign, multiplayer, and zombies had new ideas, and systems that weren't just there for novelty. They made the game deeper and more replayable. At this point, Treyarch had found their rhythm. They weren't just the Call of Duty studio that took risks. They were the one delivering some of the most well-rounded games in the entire franchise. By the time Black Ops 3 was announced, Treyarch had built a reputation for doing things their own way. The series had shifted towards advanced movement and Treyarch followed suit. But they didn't just copy what Sledgehammer did with Advanced Warfare. Instead, they reworked the entire system into something that felt more refined. Black Ops 3 introduced a momentum-based movement system. It wasn't about double jumping everywhere. It was about maintaining rhythm. Movement felt smoother, wall running was built directly into map design. You could chain together jumps, mantles, and slides with more control than anything Call of Duty had offered before. Every specialist character had a unique ability or weapon, which changed how players approached engagements. Some felt a bit overpowered at first, but the system added a level of variety to gunfights that made the game more dynamic. Visually, the game looked clean. The lighting, color palette, and animation work stood out. It felt more stylized than Infinity Ward's direction, and that worked in its favor. But the real core of Black Ops 3, the part that made it legendary, was zombies. This was Jason Blundell's vision at its peak. Black Ops 3 shipped with Shadows of Evil, filled with rituals, alternate dimensions, complex weapon crafting, and a storyline that stretched beyond anything the mode had attempted before. Over the course of the game's lifecycle, Treyarch released maps like Der Eisendrache, Zetsubo Nishima, Gorod Krovi, and Revelations. Each map expanded the lore, added new mechanics, and introduced unique environments that gave players a reason to keep playing. These weren't just good zombies maps, they became the gold standard. To this day, Black Ops 3 is widely considered the most complete and ambitious zombies experience the franchise has ever had. It wasn't just the design of the maps or the quality of the weapons. It was the pacing, the mystery, and how the community came together to solve complex Easter eggs. People still talk about staying up all night with friends trying to finish one of Blundell's step-by-step story quests. Everything about Black Ops 3 Zombies made it feel like its own game inside of the game. And because of how high that bar was set, Zombies hasn't fully recovered since. No matter how polished the newer versions looked or how many features they added, nothing has really captured the depth, personality, or the mystery that Black Ops 3 delivered. And that's a big reason why expectations for Treyarch stayed so high, even when the circumstances changed. Black Ops 4 is when everything started to shift. For the first time in Treyarch's history, the game didn't include a traditional campaign. There were character missions and small story cutscenes, but it wasn't a full single-player mode. That change didn't come from a lack of ideas, it came from behind the scenes. The original campaign for BO4 was cancelled partway through development, reportedly due to concerns about whether it would meet deadlines. The team pivoted hard to focus on multiplayer and zombies. This was also the first time Call of Duty jumped into the Battle Royale trend with Blackout. And to their credit, Blackout was a strong attempt. The map was massive, stitched together from iconic locations like Nuketown, firing range, Asylum. Gunplay felt tighter, armor and healing systems were responsive. The pacing was deliberate, but even though it played well, it didn't take over the genre the way Activision hoped it would, especially with Fortnite dominating and PUBG still pretty active. Then there was the monetization. Black Ops 4 had a full $60 price tag at launch, but it was also packed with microtransactions. Cosmetic items were placed into rotating shops. A lot of players felt like the game was treating them like customers instead of players, and the backlash was loud. On the zombies side, things were more complicated. The game launched with 4 zombies maps, including 6, Voyage of Despair, Blood of the Dead, and Classified. While the variety was there, the tone and mechanics felt inconsistent. The HUD was cluttered, the perk system had been reworked, and while there was some good ideas scattered throughout the experience, the direction lacked cohesion. The community felt it, and so did the developers. Reports began surfacing of crunch at Treyarch, contract workers described working long hours for little recognition. The pressure to meet deadlines and deliver on every front was clearly taking a toll. And while Black Ops 4 still had its fans, it felt like the first time Treyarch released a game that didn't feel complete. Black Ops Cold War wasn't supposed to be Treyarch's game. After MW 2019, the next Call of Duty was meant to be led by Raven Software and Sledgehammer Games. But halfway through development, things started falling apart behind the scenes. There were disagreements over the direction of the game and the project wasn't coming together. Activision stepped in and handed leadership of the project to Treyarch. But with only 1 year left until release, that's a very short amount of time to build a Call of Duty game, especially while coordinating with 2 other studios. The result? Black Ops Cold War, a game that had potential but felt uneven. The campaign tried something different. It had dialogue choices and optional side missions. The story followed CIA operatives during the early 1980s trying to track down a Soviet spy named Perseus. It was one of the more grounded stories Treyarch had told in a while. Some of the Cold War era set pieces were well done. The missions where you infiltrate the KGB headquarters felt tense and methodical, a real break from the usual explosions and shootouts. But not everything landed. The pacing of the campaign was inconsistent. Some missions felt like they were designed by a different team entirely, and the connection to previous Black Ops characters like Mason and Woods didn't feel fully developed. They were present, but more as a nostalgic callbacks than actual drivers of the story. On the technical side, the game was built using a modified version of Treyarch's engine, but it also had to accommodate tech and assets from the IW engine used in Modern Warfare 2019. The result was a mix of animations, UI, and mechanics that didn't always feel cohesive. Multiplayer felt faster and more arcade-like than Modern Warfare, which was a positive for a lot of players, but it also relied heavily on nostalgia. Many of the most popular maps were remakes of older ones like Nuketown, Raid, and Express. It was a familiar loop, but it felt like the studio was stretched thin. Zombies in Cold War took a step back towards simplicity. The round-based structure returned with Die Machine, a reimagining of Nacht der Untoten, but this time with a more modern military aesthetic. It was a cleaner version of Zombies, with clearer progression and more straightforward mechanics. You could bring in custom loadouts, exfiltrate during matches, and upgrade perks over time. Some players appreciated the accessibility, others missed the depth and mystery that made Zombies feel unique in the first place. The map design was functional, but it lacked the distinct atmosphere and personality that maps in Black Ops 3 had. It felt efficient, like it was designed to check boxes rather than pull you into a world. Overall, Cold War was playable and in some ways enjoyable, but it also felt like a game that was held together by tape. The result of a studio stepping in late to rescue a project that had already gone wrong, and once again, the community gave Treyarch a pass. They said they didn't have time, they weren't supposed to make this game, and that was true, but it also meant that for the second time in a row, Treyarch wasn't operating at full strength, they were adapting to survive. Black Ops 6 had every opportunity to be a return to form. Treyarch finally had a full development cycle. No broken handoffs, no salvaging another studio's vision. Just 4 solid years to build something from the ground up. The main feature they introduced was Omni Movement. The idea behind it was simple. Give players full directional control while sprinting, sliding, diving, even while transitioning between stances. And in motion, it looks pretty impressive. You can dart around corners, reposition quickly, and there's a fluidity to how you move. That's unlike any previous COD. But the problem isn't the movement system, it's everything around it. Let's start with the map design. From the very first match, something felt off. Yes, most of them follow a 3-lane structure, but it's not the kind of 3-lane design you'd find in a classic Treyarch map. These feel different. It's like they were generated by AI. You can see the attempt at complexity, extra flank routes, vertical lanes, side tunnels, but they didn't serve a purpose. There's no flow, no intuitive power positions, no identity. The symmetry feels artificial, it's not competitive. It's hard to tell which side has an advantage because every angle is cluttered. Every lane is exposed from 3 other spots. Instead of feeling like you're gaining control of a map, you're just rotating through disconnected pieces. And that problem feeds into how gunfights play out. I've played enough to unlock every single mastery camo in Zombies, Multiplayer and Warzone. That means I've tested almost every weapon across every possible fight. And across the board, something just doesn't feel right. It's not even about balance, it's about how guns feel. In past Treyarch games, even low-tier weapons had character. There was weight, sound, identity. Now most guns feel synthetic. The recoil is oddly shaped, the audio is really weird, and the feedback is dull. And even when you land shots, something about the hit detection feels inconsistent. Sometimes you know you hit first, but lose anyway. Other times it feels like you blink and die. It's not lag, it's the fundamentals. And as someone who's followed Treyarch games, mostly for Zombies, this one hit me the hardest. I was always the kind of player who looked forward to Zombies. But after completing a lot of challenges, doing a lot of Easter eggs, unlocking the mastery camos, I barely play Zombies anymore. It's not that it's bad. On paper, it's better than Cold War. It runs smoother, the pacing is more accessible, it's even got more content, and yet somehow it still feels empty. It doesn't feel like the Zombies we all grew up to love. It feels like Warzone with Zombies, or Multiplayer with Zombies. It has all the systems, plates, armor, score streaks, exfilling, but none of the soul. There's no unique identity anymore. The sound design, the enemy pacing, the tone, it's not gritty, it's not scary like it used to be. It's not frightening. It doesn't separate itself the way classic Treyarch games did. That's what made the older games special. Back then, everything felt different. Every mode felt different. Multiplayer had its own feel. Zombies had its own feel. The campaign had its own feel. And you could switch between them and know exactly where you were. Not just in gameplay and mechanics, but in the mood, the tone, the atmosphere. They were built as separate worlds. Now everything feels like it's been flattened into one system. The UI is the same, the movement is the same. Even the way the loadouts and objectives are handled, it's just reusing assets over and over again. The sense of immersion is completely gone. Even the campaign, which had some decent missions, couldn't break free from it. There's one mission early on that plays with stealth and tension. That was something different, but most of the rest of the story just follows the same formula. Insert breach, exfil, repeat. It doesn't feel like Cold War or Black Ops 1. It feels like a modern action shooter with familiar characters plugged in. So when I look at Black Ops 6 now, I don't know what to think about the new systems or the new tech or the new movement. I think about how it feels like it could have been made by anyone, and that's the part which sticks. Treyarch was the studio that always carved out its own lane. They made loud decisions, stylized choices, sometimes it didn't work, but when it did, it changed the series. That's not what this is. Black Ops 6 isn't a bad game, it's just one that feels like it had to pass through too many filters before we ever got to see it. The movement is new, the systems are modern, but the identity is completely gone. After looking at the full timeline from World at War to Black Ops 6, you start to see a pattern. Treyarch didn't fall off overnight. Their identity didn't vanish because they ran out of ideas. It was chipped away slowly. Year after year, the demands got bigger. What used to be a single studio making one game turned into a support system for multiple platforms, cross-progression, Warzone updates, and seasonal content. At the same time, Activision started aligning every part of the franchise into one shared structure. That's where things like the COD HQ come in, where every title connects to the same launcher, where guns from one game have to carry over to the next, and where systems have to be compatible across modes, even across generations of players. That kind of system doesn't leave much room for individual style. It makes creativity feel more like a negotiation than a vision. The Treyarch that once released wild, stylized campaigns and emotionally driven Zombies maps is now operating inside a structure where their freedom is limited. And when you combine that with the constant pressure of annual releases, With burnout, with leadership turnover, with developers being pulled to support Warzone, it becomes really difficult to preserve that original energy. I don't think it's fair to say they fell off. I think they've been trying to survive in a system that slowly squeezed out the individuality that they were once known for. And that's not just a Treyarch issue, it's a reflection of how the entire franchise, and to some extent, the entire industry, has changed. The passion is still there. You can see it in some of the mechanics. You can see it in the way some developers talk about their work. But the way the games are built now, it isn't designed to protect the passion. And that's what really happened to Treyarch. I'll never forget the first time I played World at War. I didn't understand what I was doing, but I couldn't stop playing. The pacing, the maps, the atmosphere, it pulled me into something I didn't even know I cared about. It's wild to think that a random disc my friend brought to my house would set me on the path I'm on now. Making videos, talking about this series, and still following what these studios create more than a decade later. Treyarch was a big part of that. Not just because they made good games, but because they made games that felt personal, ambitious, and full of identity. I don't know if we'll ever see that version of Treyarch again, but I hope that somewhere down the line, whether in future Zombies mode, a new IP, or even a small moment in the campaign, that spark comes back. Because when it's there, you can feel it. And when it's gone, you notice. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. If you've ever been pulled into this franchise the same way I was, let me know your story in the comments. Drop a like if this video spoke to you, and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. I'll see you guys in the next one.